Greetings once again from Cooperstown, New York, site of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. We're very glad you could join us for another edition of our virtual Voices of the Game program. Today, it's really going to be a special treat for all of you folks, for me as well. We're going to have a chance to talk to former Major Leaguer Gene Clines about a very historic day. We celebrated the 50th anniversary of that all-black lineup here in September. And we're going to continue to do that with Gene today. We'll talk about other highlights of his career. We'll also take questions for Gene a little bit later on in the Zoom group chat. Before we officially welcome Gene to the program, just want to take a moment to thank our primary sponsor, the Ford Motor Company. They make these programs available to you free of charge. And we thank the Ford Motor Company for being our sponsor throughout 2021. Our guest today, former Major Leaguer Gene Clines. And before I do officially welcome Gene, I want to run down some numbers from his career. Made his Major League debut in 1970, batted .405 in 31 games for the Pirates as a rookie. 1971, Gene platooned with Al Oliver in center field for the Pirates, batted .308 with 15 stolen bases, an important part of that World Championship team. Had his best season in 1972 when he batted .334 in 107 games and received consideration for the National League MVP award. For his career, Gene played 10 seasons, batting .277, winning that World Championship. Was also a successful coach in the major leagues from 1988 to 2002. We're very glad to have with us for virtual Voices of the Game, Gene Clines. Gene, we really appreciate it. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's been a very exciting couple of days reminiscing with my former teammates, and it was good to see them.
Yeah, you went to Pittsburgh the other day on September 1st, the exact 50th anniversary, and you got to see the other living members of that all-black lineup. Manny Sanguillen was there, of course. Dave Cash was there. Al Oliver, whom we've had on this program before, great friend of the Hall of Fame. Had you not seen those guys in a while?
I had seen them a couple of times, but it's like every time you see them, you picked up where you left off before, with stories from the past, situations. It's like just reuniting with your brother.
I've seen some of the interviews that you've done, that Dave Cash has done as well. Think about 50 years ago. Doesn't seem possible, does it, that it was that long? It's just remarkable.
When you hear the stories and you get people to go over, what happened that day 50 years ago. And you're thinking about it, and at that time with us, it was pretty much a norm. I said it was like after what happened, it was like for us, it was just another day because it had been so many times we had a lineup where we had 7 out there, so we didn't take notice and really take notice to it until pretty much after the game when all the news media came in to bring it up. Thought about it before the game, but it just didn't. We didn't know that we were making history.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot more about that day, but I want to set the table a little bit and talk about the Pirates of that era. Talk about the Pirates of that entire 1971 season. Here's a great photo that was taken during that summer. We have Willie Stargell on the left, next to him, Bill Mazeroski, then Vic Davalillo. I'm pretty sure that's you between Davalillo and Roberto Clemente, who is on the right. And to me, this is a photo that sort of represents what those Pirates were all about. Unified, having fun. Everybody was smiling. I can't imagine that it took much prompting. This seems like a pretty natural photo for the way that team was.
Well, with this photo, this kind of amplified what kind of team we had. Smiling, we knew how to take care of business. we were all for each other. It was just a fun time, for all of us to be together. And what you see in that photo is what you saw pretty much every day in that clubhouse.
Yeah. Looks like your hand is at the top, so I guess you won.
I don't know if that's the reason, but just an honor for me to be in the mix with those guys was a great thrill for me, especially my first year.
Another great photo, again, from that 1971 season. Here we have Al Oliver, who has either just hit a home run or some sort of a big hit in the game, being greeted by Willie Stargell, Roberto Clemente. We see again the unity. Al's got a big smile on his face. Stargell's giving him the bear hug. I've talked to a number of other players on the Pirate team of 1971. I've not talked to you yet about it. Many of the players would tell me that they would joke with each other. They would rib each other. They would make remarks sort of along racial lines, but in a humorous way. Guys didn't take offense to it. It was something that actually brought the team closer together. Is that your recollection as well?
Yes, with that team, you could say when in that Pirate clubhouse, you could say what you wanted to say. You never offended anybody because we knew that whatever we did it all together as a team. And what we said and what we did in that clubhouse, it stayed right there in that clubhouse. It was just between. It's like two brothers arguing, with each other. You don't have to take it outside. We were all pulling for each other, and it was just another day at the office.
Were you one of the quieter guys on the team, or were you an active participant in really giving heck to everybody else?
Well, I tell you what, it was pretty much a trade-off because everybody was a target. It didn't matter who you were. We had people in the clubhouse that was always there was always somebody stirring up something, whether it be Doc Ellis, whether it be Dave Ricketts, one of our coaches, Tony Barterone, our trainer. So everybody was a target. You could be ribbed or gotten on. It didn't matter who you were, Clemente, Stargell, and everybody knew that. That's just the way it was in that Pirate clubhouse.
So you never took any offense, even though you were a young guy and you were meeting some of these players for the first time. You knew that it was being done good-naturedly, right?
That's just where we were. If you took it serious, that'd probably be the worst thing you could possibly do because they would never get off of you.
Yeah. Let's set the scene from that day, September 1st, 1971. Before the game, manager Danny Murtaugh, terrific manager, fills out his lineup card. Leading off, Rennie Stennett, second baseman from Panama. Batting second, yourself, Gene Clines, center fielder, San Pablo, California. Batting third, the great one, Roberto Clemente, right fielder from Puerto Rico. Batting cleanup, Willie Stargell. He's in left field, born in Oklahoma, but grew up in the Bay Area. Batting fifth, the catcher, Manny Sanguillen from Panama. Then at third base, Dave Cash, normally a second baseman, but played third base that day from Utica, New York, not far from here in Cooperstown. Batting seventh, Al Oliver. He played first base out of Portsmouth, Ohio. Maybe the least known of the starting nine that day, the shortstop, Jackie Hernandez from Cuba, excellent defensive shortstop. And then pitching the guy that you mentioned a moment ago, the always colorful Doc Ellis from Los Angeles, California. Big offensive day for the Pirates. Scored 5 runs in the first, 3 runs in the second, on the way to a 10-7 victory. It's one of the rare days where Doc Ellis didn't have it. He was knocked out in the second inning, despite the fact that he had a great season, was picked to start the All-Star game that summer. But the Pirate bats made up for some of the early pitching struggles. And it ended up being another big victory for the Pirates. You guys were holding on to first place. You had a 4.5 game lead on the division going into the game that night in Pittsburgh. And with the win, you then expanded that to 5.5, would eventually win the division pretty decisively. There is a great quote from you from a book that was written by a man named George Castle called When the Game Changed. And here is what you said to George about September 1st, 1971. It started that afternoon. I got to the ballpark and one of our bat boys made the comment, "The Homestead Grays are playing tonight." That thought stayed in my mind, and it didn't dawn on me until they were playing the national anthem. I looked to my left and I saw Stargell, and I looked to my right and I saw Clemente. I turned around and I started looking at all the positions. I said, now I understand what the bat boy said earlier that afternoon. It's a great quote from you. It's kind of amazing that what that bat boy said, it didn't 100% register until the anthem that night.
That's that's a true story. Like I said, we had so many situations where we had like seven minorities out there at any moment, so it wasn't anything new to us. But I just could not get out of my mind what that kid had said to me, and it stuck with me the whole afternoon during batting practice, and I couldn't get it out of my head. And like I said, it wasn't until the national anthem, and when I did turn around and take a look, I said, now it dawned on me exactly what he was saying. But I was surprised that, and wasn't even thinking that was the first time it had ever happened.
Yeah, it almost happened in 1967. A few years before you arrived in Pittsburgh, the Pirates started a lineup that had 8 black players, but the pitcher was a white pitcher, a right-hander named Denny Rybant. So that day, 4 years earlier, came up just a little bit short. I know that Al Oliver and Dave Cash talked about this during the game. They noticed this all-black lineup in the middle of the game. You said you noticed it during the anthem. Did you talk to any of the other guys during the game, or did that wait until the post-game clubhouse?
That didn't come up until after we were in the clubhouse. My thought was still not on what had just happened. Like I said, the main focus was to win the game that night. And it didn't dawn on me until I was wondering why we had so many sports writers and people were in the clubhouse during a regular season game. And it wasn't like we were in the playoffs, the World Series, and all this attention around Danny Murtaugh's office. It took a while to understand, what the big commotion was all about.
It's interesting. There actually was a Pittsburgh newspaper strike at the time, but there were broadcasters who were there, and there may have been, other local reporters from other outlets, and they apparently noticed it. They asked Danny Murtaugh about it after the game. We're going to talk about Danny's reaction and your thoughts on Danny as well. In terms of where you were, you're a young guy in 1971. It's your first full season. Pirates, really good team. You're leading the division. Baseball was obviously the number one priority. Was it a case where this took a few years for you for this to really sink in and understand the historical significance of it?
It took a long time to really understand exactly what had happened. And especially now, 50 years later, that this has never happened before. And it's like, when I think about that, I think about, say Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier, that what we did as a team that year, and at that moment, 50 years later, it hasn't been done or duplicated. And it makes you feel more and more satisfied that you were a part of that group, that very special team, to be a participant in something that's 50 years and counting.
I'm curious about some of the interactions that went on that day, especially in the clubhouse. Did any of the black players kid the white players and say, "Hey, we don't really need you guys. Take a few days off"? Anything like
You know
that
something?
happen?
No, it
No.
wasn't. Those guys
Good natured. Good natured, I mean.
no, said nobody picked up on it.
Yeah.
It was to have that many black and Latinos in a lineup was like a norm. It was just like a normal day at the office for us.
Gene, I'm curious about the fan reaction in Pittsburgh. The Pirates, as good as they were then, didn't draw a ton of fans, about middle of the road in the National League. The attendance that day, early September game, 11,278 fans. What was it like for a young African-American like yourself playing in Pittsburgh? Was it a city receptive to Black and Latino players? Did you like playing there?
Well, yes, I did. The one thing about Pittsburgh, working class community, blue collar, we always had in the organization had more Black and Latino players in the organization, pretty much than anybody in baseball. So it wasn't like until later on that other teams started to sign and bring in more Black and Latino players. And that was pretty much because of watching the success that was coming out of the Pirate organization.
Did you find the fans were supportive of you throughout your career there?
The fans were always supportive of us, but here we are. We're talking about Pittsburgh, a small town. It wasn't like New York or LA or another big city. We were just a small town team that no matter where we went and who we played against, that we always drew a crowd because people wanted to watch how our team played because they knew there was going to be a lot of action.
Yeah. What neighborhood did you live in? Were you close to the ballpark, or did you have a longer commute to get to Three River Stadium?
Where I lived from, I was like about 10 minutes away. Because pretty much it was like 5 or 6 of us Latinos. We stayed pretty much in the same area in Pittsburgh. So we were about maybe 10 minutes from the ballpark.
Yeah. Did you have your own place, or did some of the players share a place during the season?
No, at that time, everybody pretty much had their own places, we were all married, so we had our wives and kids there, but we pretty much stayed in the same area, and we were all fairly close to the ballpark.
I want to talk about some of these individual players, not only great players that were part of this lineup, but some really intriguing characters and personalities. I want to start with this man, Willie Stargell. He played left field that day. We know about him becoming that leader of the 1979 team. By then, he was known as Pops. But what was he like as a little bit of a younger player in the early 70s? Clemente was still there. Clemente was still regarded as, I guess, the number one guy, the number one leader in the clubhouse. What was Willie like at this earlier point in his career?
I was probably the luckiest of all of the entire group because we were from the same area, grew up in the same area as kids, and I knew Willie and knew of Willie when I was in high school and before. Got a chance to meet him a couple of times, so I was aware of him and being from the same area. So when I got there to Pittsburgh, I felt I had a little heads up on anybody else that I knew him a few years before they did, and coming from the same area, we knew exactly what was going on, and we would share stories. And and he'd always call me Holmes. And that was just a reminder, letting him know, hey, we're from the same hometown area. And he was the one that I really looked up to, because to have a mentor right there with you to show you, how to play the game, how to carry yourself both on and off the field.
Tell us a little bit about his personality. What was he like in the clubhouse, in the dugout, even away from the ballpark?
Willie was he was that quiet leader. Every now and then he'd throw a few jabs out there, and then he'd kind of walk away. But he was a guy that you found yourself all the time watching his moves, how he carried himself. He was a pro's pro all the time.
He was helpful to you in those early years?
Oh, hey, I leaned on him so much and so heavily about everything, just about what's going on in the world, family problems. I could go and talk to him about anything. I didn't have to hold back. If there was something that was on my mind, I knew I could always go to Willie. It didn't matter what time it was.
Gene, did it seem obvious to you that once Clemente moved on, and of course we lost him under those tragic circumstances, New Year's Eve 1972, was it obvious that Willie was going to assume that mantle of leadership when Clemente moved on?
Well, without a doubt. I mean, he was that other leader, and fortunate enough that we were able to have two people of that character and type in the same clubhouse was a reward in itself. But the stuff that he learned from Clemente, he passed it on to the rest of us. And the one thing that Willie, having a conversation with him, we talked about different scenarios, and I asked him why he taught. One time I asked him why he talks to all these younger guys, and he was telling me the story about he was taught, and the one thing that stuck with me with him that I carried on in my career was his theory was to pass the torch. The stuff that he learned and picked up, he wanted to pass it on to other players, and let the other players pass it on to another group. So it's like the information and the wisdom that you passed on would never stop. It just kept growing.
Gene, I've got to ask you on a lighter note about these parties that Willie Stargell put on. Al Oliver has told me about them. Willie would invite everybody on the team, didn't matter whether they were Black, Latino, white, what have you. Everybody was invited. And then Al told me that he would serve this drink called Purple Passion. Do you remember that at all?
Oh, if you went to one of Willie's parties, everybody knew about Purple Passion. It's my first experience of having that experience out of my body was at a party where Purple Passion was being served.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that other great leader, Roberto Clemente. Of course, he played right field that day. I mean, as if it wasn't exciting enough for you. You're part of this history-making lineup, but you're flanked by Stargell in left field, Clemente in right field. Tell us about Roberto's personality. He was obviously older than most of the other guys on the team, with the exception of Mazeroski. What was Roberto like? Did you talk to him a lot? Was he a guy you felt comfortable in approaching?
He was another guy you felt comfortable talking to him about any subject at any time, at any moment. But he was the type of guy that fairly quiet, but that did not make him not be a target. There'd always be somebody that would in that clubhouse that no matter what his mood might seem like at that particular time, he knew he was a target too, and that he was not off limits. And he took it very well. But like I said, you had so much respect for this guy. And he's another one. I found myself, watching his every move, watching the way he walked, watching the way he threw, watching the way he went about business. I mean, everything was really serious. You didn't really see Robbie do a lot of smiling. You saw him; he smiled in the clubhouse, but once he left that clubhouse and went out in that dugout, it was like a light switch. He turned into who he really was, that superstar that you wanted to watch every move he made.
Gene, you might remember this play in the World Series in '71. Clemente hits kind of a routine comebacker to Mike Cuellar, who's pitching for the Orioles. And a lot of players, we see this today, unfortunately, we see some players, routine grounders, they don't run that hard. They maybe give it a 65, 75% effort. But he busted out of the gate right from the moment. Cuellar actually noticed this, bobbled the ball, and then threw a little bit wildly to first. Roberto ends up beating it out for, I think it was ruled an infield single, and that led to a huge rally for the Pirates that afternoon. Do you remember that play? And does that kind of hustle, was that something you saw from Roberto all the time?
That's where a lot of stuff I learned as a base runner and as a hitter about. You talk about hustling hard, forcing the defense to make a mistake. You never know when those mistakes are going to happen. But that just goes to show you that this was something that he did all the time. So it was just human nature. And for him to, and a lot of it had to do with anger, that he could have hit the ball or should have hit the ball harder or done more with it. And that's a way of venting some of your frustrations of, hey, let it go, play hard. You never know what's going to happen.
Gene, I've got to ask you about that throwing arm of his. Did you ever catch yourself just being a spectator in center field, just watching him make some of those throws, not only in that World Series, but throughout the early 1970s? Did you ever find yourself not napping on the field, but getting caught into the trap of almost being a spectator because he had such a spectacular arm?
No, with him, it was like watching him. He was a motivator. You watch him, he was the one that kept it going, where you just say, watch how he goes about his job. This is how you play the game. This is how you go about it. And being around him, it always made you either play harder, whether it be in practice, because if you want to see how the game is played and what you should do, you watch Robbie. You're always trying to implement Robbie and how he goes about his business, because there's a reason why he's good as he is. Nobody's giving him anything. I mean, he's worked for everything. So he was the guy that was a big and huge motivator, and you wanted to follow in his footsteps.
Years ago, when Willie Stargell came to Cooperstown, he did actually a program here for the United States Post Office. He told me about this pregame drill that Clemente used to do. I don't know how often he did it, but he would stand out in right field. He had a garbage can at third base, and he would practice making throws, trying to throw the ball on a fly into the garbage can. Do you remember that at all?
Yes. That was just, guys do certain things to say keep themselves sharp. And he was such a good athlete that he could do stuff like that, being off balance. And that had a lot to do with the accuracy that he had as far as throwing the ball. He could be going at a ball down the right field line and be completely turned around. But as he spun, he knew exactly where his body was at in order to throw that ball, whether it be at second base, third base, or home plate. So by him being a great athlete, this was something that he did a lot as a kid. And, he never got away from the things that made him the player that he is.
Yeah. Of course, Clemente and Stargell were the two Hall of Famers that played that day. But the most colorful and controversial player was the starting pitcher that evening in Pittsburgh, Doc Ellis. It was not one of his better games, but for much of that season, he was the Pirates ace, really helped carry the team during the first half of the season. We hear so many stories about Doc. Some of them are outrageous. Some of them don't seem possible. Tell us, was Doc as colorful and crazy as everyone's made him out to be?
Tell you what, you had to know Doc to really understand Doc. He was probably one of the most misunderstood guys that people, they thought they knew, but they didn't know, because he was an entirely different person in the clubhouse than what people saw on the outside of Doc. A lot of his antics, as people would see it, we as players would just ignore it, because they say Doc is being Doc. By saying that, the misunderstanding how Doc was very boisterous, and he'd tell you exactly what was on his mind. A lot of times people were not ready for that. I mean, he didn't do things that were, or make up stuff that was off the wall. What he said and what he did was the truth. A lot of people didn't quite understand that, and he always gave them the impression of being very standoffish. And like I said, again, not knowing exactly who Doc was or what type of person he is, was very, very misunderstood by the public, whether it be at the ballpark, anywhere. Everybody took to him being a very militant type guy, but they didn't understand. Nobody knew about how he grew up as a kid being in the inner city, and that's where a lot of people were lost. They never knew anything about the things you have to do just for survival of being an inner city kid.
Yeah. Gene, would it be accurate to say he was a really intelligent guy with a good heart, and maybe people didn't always see that?
So I look at the time, I said, Doc was as dumb as a fox. He was as dumb as a fox, very aware of everything that was going on around him. And sometimes he would put on, to keep people at ease, he didn't want you to get too close of that inner circle. So it was this way of kind of keeping you at a distance where he can still be himself, and you thinking that this guy's crazy. No, he's not crazy. He's very aware of what the hell's going on.
Yeah. So he wanted other people to think he's not that bright. In reality, he was.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
He didn't really care what you thought. He was gonna be Doc. What you see is what you're gonna get. And the thing about him is like all the time. It was never a put on. What you saw was all the time. We as players, we knew that, and it didn't bother us. It's what the public or people that weren't around him. This was that protective shell he had to keep them at a distance. He didn't want you to try. He didn't want you to figure him out. He wanted you to always try and keep you on edge.
You know, he was a guy that admittedly had a lot of problems with drugs and alcohol during his career. But then after he retired, he rehabilitated himself. He stopped drinking. He stopped taking drugs. He really became a role model. He would travel around the country, travel in his Southern California area, speaking to kids about problems with drug abuse, telling him not to repeat the mistakes that he made. Did you keep in contact with Doc after his playing days? Did you see him at any time after he retired from baseball?
Yeah, well, yeah, yes, I did. We always stayed in touch, and a lot of that information that he finally is part of passing that torch, passing on that information and stuff that he learned from his mistakes that he would pass on to a younger generation or younger players. He didn't want some of the guys a lot of people to make the mistakes that he made in life. And that's growing up. It's like us as kids. How many times have your parents have told you things you knew at that particular time, you didn't want to hear it. Then you go back later on in life and you apologize and say, hey, I want to thank you for being hard on me. And the reason I'm in the position I'm in right now is that through a lot of stuff that you told me made me a better person. And I can look at if I hadn't listened to some of the hard or tough love that you threw out there, I look at a lot of my friends in my neighborhood, either a lot of them are dead or they're in prison, and say I could have been one of those statistics. And then you go back and that you're not, and you apologize and tell those people, hey, thank you, for helping me when I thought I knew it all.
Sadly, Doc Ellis, Roberto Clemente, Willie Stargell have all left us, all really leaving us at too young an age. But there are some other players from the All Black lineup that are still with us. You saw them the other day in Pittsburgh. Let's talk about Dave Cash first. He was a young player at the time. You told me that he and you signed at the very same time, same year with the Pirates. He had a difficult job coming up. He was trying to succeed a legend like Mazeroski, and yet he seemed to handle it pretty darn well.
I'll tell you what, we had a conversation the other day where we were sitting there talking, and how much at the time when Dave signed, Dave was a shortstop, and now he's got to be switched over to be to work at second base. And Mazeroski worked with Dave so hard, and Dave picked up so much from Maz. Going from being a shortstop to a second base, second baseman, what to do around second base. That a lot of times it's just a lot of hard work that went on with that group. And, like I said, Maz made Dave into a good second baseman, especially, being a shortstop his entire career, and all of a sudden going to the other side of turning the double plays. And they put a lot of time in together, and it was a lot of work for that transition going from being a shortstop to a second baseman.
No, that's really interesting, Gene, because at that time, veteran players didn't always help young guys, especially young guys who were going to replace them. Maz was kind of the exception to the rule there.
Maz was one of the exceptions of the rule. And then when you realize a guy that has some outstanding athletic ability and the type of person you are, which, Maz was not being a selfish person and always wanting to help and knowing and looking at the guy working with him, he wants to know. He's not afraid from work. Maz loved that. And we had a couple of incidents where during an instructional league game where Maz would come out. I just came to spring training early just to work with Dave to help him out with the transition of being around second base.
Yeah. I saw an interview that Dave did the other day. He's still sharp all these years later, has great recall of those early years in the 1970s. Looks good too, as you do as well, we should point out. What's Dave doing these days? He's, I believe, fully retired from baseball. How's he keeping busy?
He's fully retired. We talked about getting together and playing a couple of rounds of golf over there. And he's over in Clearwater, Florida, not far from me. But we have reconnected where we're closer and we talk more and look forward to spending a lot more time being with each other again.
Oh, that's very nice. Let's talk about this gentleman, Manny Sanguillen, one of the most popular Pirate players of that era. The perception of him has always been that Manny was, always smiling, fun-loving guy, but he actually was surprisingly tough. Also, he had been a boxer as a young guy. Did you must have known that about him, right?
Yeah, we knew that, the neighborhood and area where he grew up in Panama, that being a boxer, I mean, that was pretty much, you better learn how to defend yourself. Happy-go-lucky guy, always had a smile on his face. I think I've only seen Sangy get mad one time where he really wanted to. He showed his anger, and I was stupid enough to be in the path of trying to stop him go after somebody else, and trying to stop him, and he ran right over me, and I was only able to trip him up by the shoelaces and make him fall. But by that time, he had run up my leg, my chest, and that never happened again.
Yeah. Was he going after a player on another team?
Yes, he was going after a player on another team. And like I said, that's the first one I'd ever seen him angry.
Yeah. That
he wanted to go at anybody. And that's the only reason that happened is when that guy made the suggestion or made the gesture, come get me. And he just snapped.
Yeah. Wow. Now, for many years, he used to run a food stand out of the side of the ballpark in Pittsburgh. I don't think he's doing that anymore, but have you ever tried any of his recipes?
I've never tried any of his recipes. I've heard about it. And I've just had a lot of people rave about how good it was, but I wasn't going to tell him that it was good.
How's Manny doing these days?
Manny's doing pretty good. We talked for those 3 days in Pittsburgh, just like I said, reminiscing on things from the past, old stories, just rekindling things. And it's funny how many things that could have happened 30, 35 years ago. And as you're talking, you start bringing up these different stories and scenarios or situations. And it's like you picked up from the last time that happened. And that's what happened for 3 days. We were just trading war stories with each other.
One other player that was part of that reunion, Al Oliver. Al's been on this program before, terrific supporter of the Hall of Fame. He's a minister, very involved with education as well. It's interesting, though, you were platooning with Al for much of the 1971 season. The two of you would alternate in center depending on the opposing pitcher. Was there any kind of a rivalry that developed between you two, or was that not at all a problem?
That was never a problem with anybody on that Pirate Club, no matter who was playing. If one guy was playing, the other guy was there as a cheerleader to root for the other guy. The one thing about that team is we knew what it took to win. And if you talk about a team of guys not being selfish, not worried about their own personal goals and agendas, they knew we were all out there for the same purpose, and that was to win. So if you were not playing, you were on the bench, you're cheering for that other guy, and that's just what we did as a team. With the Pirates, everybody rooted for the other guy. Nobody got selfish and thought about their own personal needs and goals. We were all out there for the same purpose, and that was to win.
We love Al here at the Hall of Fame. He's been great with us. He's always a positive, upbeat guy. I imagine he was the same way as a player.
Al has not changed. He's still Scoop is Scoop. Same personality. You know what you're going to get 7 days a week. As far as being around him, I've loved every moment being around him.
Very memorably did the invocation at the Hall of Fame induction ceremony the year that Bill Mazeroski was inducted. I believe that was back in 2001. I want to spend a few minutes on the manager and the general manager of that 1971 Pirates team. It was Danny Murtaugh who filled out the lineup card that day. Do you think Danny was aware of what he was doing? Do you think it was maybe something he noticed later? Do you think he was trying to make a point, a social statement? What's your feeling on that?
For me, Danny was not trying to make any. For me, he wasn't trying to make any social statement. He knew he was lucky enough to have the type of players that he had around himself. He had so many choices that he was not going to go wrong. No matter what choice he made, he was not going to go wrong because he knew he was going to have talented people out there who were out there to do the most important thing, and that was to win.
Yeah.
And he, you look at that ball club, you look at that team. How could you make a mistake? You can't, to have that much talent and to have those many choices, you can put all those names in a hat, shake it up, take out 9 or 8 or whatever, and hey, you're not going to go wrong.
Yeah.
And to sit back and watch him, he's probably the only, well, without a doubt, the only manager that I've ever been around to watch him sit on that bench and just kind of rock and watch the game because he had so much confidence in the players out there that he didn't show a whole lot of emotions. He knew what they were capable of doing because they would do it day in and day out. They were so consistent at it. But like I said, another guy, he was he was so ahead of his time, it's unbelievable.
Really?
Oh, there was one incident I had with him. I was a little upset that I wasn't playing, and I wanted to have a talk with him. So one of our coaches, Dave Ricketts, says, he said, "Hey, before you go in there and see the skipper tomorrow," he said, "Tonight you sit down at home and you write out everything you want to say. Write it out." And I went home that night and I'm writing I had all this information stuff out, all these courses I wanted to find out why I wasn't playing and blah, blah, this. So I get to the ballpark and come to the clubhouse, and I said, "Skip, I'd like to talk to you." "Oh, yeah, come on in." So I went into his office and sat down, and I had this list, and I had set up all night writing all these questions that I wanted him to answer. And we were back in that room for about 45 minutes. And after the 45 minutes, after sitting there and talking to Danny, and he talked about the family, the kids, the wife, the dog. He talked about this priest, and that we talked for 45 minutes. I felt so great when I left that office, and I never said anything that I wanted to say after I left that office. And then when I finally walked out, I'm getting ready to go, and I turned around, and all I saw was a big Irish grin. And you couldn't get mad at him. I just turned, I said, "Well, okay." And I just walked away.
Yeah. That's great. Here's a guy that doesn't get a lot of credit, the general manager, Joe Brown. He put that 71 Pirates team together. He would aggressively draft African-American players. He would go into the Caribbean. He would send scouts like Howie Hake into Latin America to sign young Latino talent. Back then, is it correct that the general manager didn't really have a lot of contact with players? I imagine you didn't talk to Joe all that much.
No. Talked to Joe a little bit, but the guys who made the contact, the most contact with was, guys like Howie Hake and his coaching, and I mean his scouting staff. And the thing about Joe knew how to put the right people around him to get the best talent. So there was no need for him to be the showboat being out there. He surrounded himself with the best scouts, the best workers, and he had so much confidence in what they were able to do because the abundance of talent just kept coming, and just kept coming and coming and coming. There's a reason why he didn't have to go out and toot his horn. He was probably more proud of being a part of it, of the success of the players coming through the organization. And for me, here's a guy that wasn't given enough of the credit of what was going or really was going on or happening with that Pittsburgh organization.
Yeah. We have a few minutes remaining with former Major League outfielder Gene Clines. We want to mix in some of your questions as well. So if you have a question for Gene, please type it into the Zoom group chat. We'll try to squeeze it in these next few minutes. In fact, we do have a question from one of our loyal fans, Donnie Leibel. Donnie used to live in the Utica area, has since moved to Bradenton. And Donnie is interested in hearing Mr. Clines' memories of his Chicago Cubs teammate, Bobby Mercer. You played with Bobby a little bit toward the end of your career.
Yeah, I played with Bobby. Matter of fact, his locker was like about three lockers down from me, and I enjoyed being and talking around Bobby because he was always talking about baseball, and we were always talking about getting an edge or what to look for, and being around him, there's never a dull moment. There was always a conversation revolving around baseball itself.
After your playing days, you become a coach first with the Cubs, who had been the last team you had played for. Later, you become the hitting coach, very successful with the San Francisco Giants. You were there, Barry Bonds, Jeff Kent, Rich Aurelia had some huge seasons playing for you. JT Snow was there as well. The Giants were a pretty prolific offensive club during your tenure there. And that leads into a question from another fan, Stephen Cheskin. He writes, as a hitting coach, who was the best pure hitter that you, I guess, ever saw, either as a player or as a coach?
The best pure hitter. Wow. I mean, I've got some choices. Being around Clemente is like number one. And then as he goes on, being around probably Bonds and Ken Griffey Jr., two naturals, two guys that were, again, dumb as a fox. And you just try to stay out of the way and let them do their thing. They knew what they needed to do, how to get the job done, and to be fortunate enough to be a part of the success of their careers is one of the highlights of my career.
Talk a little bit about your hitting coach philosophy. Today, it's all launch angle, which we used to call the uppercut swing back in the day. I imagine your philosophy may be a little bit different going back a few years. What were the things that you emphasized, particularly during those years in San Francisco with the Giants?
Well, I look at that lineup and I said, okay, there's 9 guys in that lineup. Everybody's got a function to do. And part of that function is to learn what can I do to help this team win. And if you stay within what your limitations are and do what you can do best, at the end of the day, we're all in there for the same reason, and that's to score one more run than the opposition. To today's players now, what I don't like is they don't know what it takes to win, especially some of the sacrifices. And it's not about me. It's not about it's about us. When you get that World Series check and that playoff check, they're all the same. You get a ring, they're all the same. There is no separation from being a guy who hit 40 home runs from a guy who hit 3. At the end of the day, we're all working for the same common goal, the same thing, and that's to win. So whatever it takes. And what a lot of them have lost is that this is a team effort. It's not an individual effort. It's a team effort. So with a team, it takes everybody.
Yeah.
It's not one guy. There's nobody gets the glory for themselves. It's for us. And when you look at the end, they say, hey, we are world champions. There's not a single picture.
Yeah.
There's the team photo. And it took everybody in that photo to be in that position to say that we are part of world champions.
I know you're retired now, Gene, but you say things like that, and it makes me think we need you out there on those coaching lines. We need you out there in baseball doing something, because your attitude, I think, is 100% spot on. Tell us about what you are doing. How are you keeping busy these days? Do you still watch a lot of baseball? How do you maintain that connection to this game?
I'm retired now, but I've had several. I have several conversations with guys who are still in the game. Talk a lot about philosophy. What my thoughts are. Always just continuing trading information. One of the things that I learned a long time ago that I keep passing on is remember the old and adjust to the new. Mm-hmm. And with this new, I remember things that I did that helped me, but not lose sight of the change in this game it is today. So that there's a balance that you pass on information. You might say it now you say it in a different way, and you're always bouncing stuff off of each other. And I get phone calls all the time, and it's just to talk about baseball or ideas. And it's not like about I have all the answers. I don't. I said, hey, I've been in this game for over 54 years, and hey, I'm still learning.
Yeah.
So the learning process has never stopped. It's just a continuation.
Well, Joanne has given me your home number, so I may call you from time to time.
Well, I'm around here. You want to talk baseball? You want to talk about life, especially life after baseball?
Yeah.
I'm always here.
Gene, it's really been an honor and a pleasure to talk to you over this past hour. Congratulations on the 50th anniversary of being part of this history-making lineup. A tremendous career, included that World Championship in 1971. And of course, a great stint as a coach, long time from the late 80s through the early 2000s with several teams, including the Giants. You have a lot to be proud of, and we really do appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Gene Clines, former major leaguer, has been our guest on this latest edition of Virtual Voices of the Game. We do thank Gene. We also thank his wife, Joanne, for helping to arrange the interview. We really appreciate her help as well. And of course, we thank the Ford Motor Company for being the sponsor of this program, along with all of our other virtual programs. Folks, we hope you've enjoyed it. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.